Today is the Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024, Johnson County Planning Commission meeting. If we could start with a call to order and a roll call.
Gregory Wolf,
Here by Zoom.
David Paderas,
Here.
Kelly Rast is absent. Brad Miller is absent. Lindsay Grisay,
Here.
Fred Starrett is absent. Steve McGank,
Here.
Tim Orrick, Leslie Hind, present. Craig Connell is absent. Andrew Logan,
Present.
Kevin Hogan.
Here.
And I'll proceed with the hybrid statement. This meeting is now being recorded in the board hearing room with Planning Commission members attending in person. There's also an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. For Zoom participants wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app at the start of the agenda item on which you desire to comment. Comments will be received from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. When it is your turn to speak, the moderator will recognize you by name or phone number used to join the Zoom webinar, and your microphone will be unmuted. Please state your name and city and state where you reside for the record, followed by your comments. All speakers are limited to 2 minutes unless the chair designates a different period. If you have trouble with Zoom, please call 913-715-9666. Board members, staff, and presenters, please state your name every time you begin talking, and please speak into the microphone so that people attending via Zoom can hear you and the comments can be transcribed for the record. This is a public meeting. We are presenting live and recording the meeting.
Thank you so much. I think we'll start off today with any public comments. Is there anybody in person that wishes to make a public comment today? Okay, hearing none. Are there any Zoom participants that would wish to make a public comment?
No one is listed on Zoom, but I just want to note that Craig Connell is logged in on Zoom.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I think we will then, hearing no public comments, we'll move on to the disclosure of conflicts or ex parte communications by any commission members. Does anybody have any of those to disclose before the Planning Commission today? All right, I think we'll start off with approval of the meeting minutes. I know that I think most of us did not receive the packets in the mail, but I think we got them emailed to us prior. Did anybody have any changes or any amendments that they wish to make to the prior meetings, meeting minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve those.
I'll move so.
Second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so then we will approve those meeting minutes. I think before we get into the zoning regulations update, I would like to mention that it is Community Planning Month, and that was established by the American Planning Association. The Planning Commission helps with supporting these efforts. I know for me personally, I used to be a big watcher and digester of national news. And when I got appointed to this board, I feel like my view has gotten more and more narrow. I think I've started tuning out national politics and gotten more and more interested in local. Sean had asked me to speak about the Community Planning Month, and I think you had a couple words you'd like to say as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners, Sean Penley, County Planning staff. Thank you for allowing us to speak. This is a little bit unusual. Planning staff doesn't normally have a proclamation like this. Normally, we do National Community Planning Month in the month of October, and we always do this. We have this as a proclamation with our Board of County Commissioners. This year, the Chairman Kelly did sign the proclamation, so we've got the official proclamation that we normally have. And we do like to promote this, but we wanted to present this at the Planning Commission just to say a few words about this. So on behalf of the Planning Department and our Director, Jay Leipzig, I would like to announce the proclamation for Community Planning Month. And the month of October is designated as Community Planning Month throughout the United States. As Chair Grisey mentioned, the American Planning Association established this as part of just a guide for development and planning principles, following practical and good planning principles. And this is something that we always like to announce in the month of October. So the Johnson County Planning Department was established in 1978, and that was to guide land use and development in the unincorporated area. Of course, other cities throughout the county have their own planning programs, but the county first established our department in 1978. And our planning staff coordinates land use and development proposals and updates to our zoning regulations and comprehensive plan. And we do that in association with our planning boards. And we really do rely on our volunteer planning boards, such as yourselves, to help guide us in that. And we really do appreciate your support in this. So obviously there's proposals that come forward before this commission, or before the Planning Commission, for policies related to the comprehensive plan, updates to our zoning regulations. And you'll hear a little bit about that tonight. We have consultants and other staff here joining us this evening, but we do appreciate your guidance on that, because it really is important as part of that overall process. And our Board of County Commissioners appreciates it as well. And our staff, I want to compliment our staff. Our planning staff works very hard. As you know, you've seen it many times before with proposals brought before you with whether it's the comprehensive plan updates or zoning regulations. Sometimes they can be quite contentious. We deal with various issues with competing interests from development interest as well as landowners, and there can often be that balancing act. And we I think do a very good job with that. So I did want to announce and kind of just go through our planning staff just for recognition. Jay Leipzig, our director, unfortunately is not able to join us this evening, but Diane Wickland as a senior planner, I don't believe, oh, she is back here. Karen Miller, a senior planner. Michelle Leininger, planner 2, she's here. Zoe Brown, planner 1, there's newest planner to the staff. We really appreciate having her. We have Elizabeth Henderson, our zoning assistant. You see every planning commission meeting. Melissa Colasanto is an administrative assistant. And Bob Mason, our zoning enforcement officer. We really appreciate his efforts. He has dual role, not only in zoning enforcement, also as our door greeter and the security for our meetings. You see him every time for you come to these meetings. We appreciate that. And tonight we have a special treat because we have additional staff from Public Works Department. We have our Director of Public Works, Brian Pedig, Jacob Askian, and Scott Kariogas, project engineers with Public Works, will be a part of this. But they're very much integral in this process too for planning, and we rely on their support very often for the work we do. And also we have consultants this evening with Clarion Associates, Paul Donegan and Eliza Blood, who will also be giving a presentation next. They will become very involved with the planning process in the county as well, upcoming. So we just wanted to take a few minutes to announce that and appreciate your support for National Community Planning Month.
Thank you so much. I know that I am always wowed by the knowledge, professionalism, and what I appreciate most is the humility and willing to teach of everybody I've encountered at the Johnson County Planning Department, and I'm sure the other departments as well. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to say about Community Planning Month? Okay, good. Well, I hope I summarized that well on behalf of my fellow planning commissioners. Why don't we move on to the zoning regulations update? I think that you're going to, maybe we'll receive a presentation from the Clarion Associates.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Sean Penley again. Paul Donegan will go over this introduction for our zoning and subdivision regulations update. We've had an opportunity to meet with Clarion Associates initially. As you recall, we mentioned previously, we've just recently started this work and this major update to our regulations, and we really appreciate Clarion Associates. They're foremost expert in this, national planning expert and planning consultant for regulations updates and land use planning. And so we'll have Paul go through the overview, the project overview and a scope of the project and timeline and just general discussion and answer questions. We will, of course, be bringing back many more updates with the draft regulations. We also do have an advisory committee as part of this, and Paul will go over that, but we'll be happy to answer any questions after this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Sean. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Paul Donegan, and I'm here with Clarion Associates, and we are at the sort of kickoff stage of this process. So it is a great time to sort of get up to speed and learn a little bit about the scope of the project and timeline and how that's expected to work. And I'll walk you through that a little bit. So we'll do a short introduction to us, the folks that are working on it, a little overview of the project, and then let you guys know about some of the next steps, things to look forward to, so we can keep you updated on the process and leave some time for questions if you have them. So here's the project team. We're working sort of under the direction of the planning department. We've got that sort of top row is the folks from Clarion Associates, and then the second row there are folks from Olson Studio, which is a Kansas City-based firm that's going to be really specializing in the community engagement and outreach portion of the process. And a big part of this project is gathering input and feedback from the community on development and growth, and helping to sort of transform a lot of those preferences and insights that we gather from the community and turning those into updates to the zoning regulations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. A little bit about us. We do a lot of zoning code update work, as well as community plans, comprehensive plans. And a big part of our work is sort of translating those policy directions, which you guys are so in tune with, and turning that into those zoning regulations. So it's really valuable to have your insights and expertise on this. And then, as I mentioned, our partners with Olson Studio and their expertise in community planning and the public process, really helping to translate and gathering more and more feedback from the community and translating that into policy direction and regulations. So a short overview of the project. Although this is the kickoff meeting, it's the second phase in the sense that at the very beginning, there's a lot of fact finding and information gathering. And we're sort of in this phase now of starting to look at all of the planning direction that's out there, and some of the feedback we've received from staff about the things that they're so in tune with that create challenges to their day-to-day work. And so we're working now on an audit and annotated outline that will provide a more specific structure of how the updated subdivision and zoning regulations can be updated and changed to be improved. And so that'll be the next deliverable that you guys will all have the opportunity to review, as well as the community. It'll be a public product that anyone would be able to review and provide feedback on. And then a little bit about the process. In the third phase, which you'll see is the longest time chunk of the timeline, we'll be drafting the regulations. And a big part of that is doing public process throughout that, gathering feedback through public open houses. I think having a two-way exchange of information, also sharing a little bit more about what zoning is, and educating the community about what is in the zoning and subdivision regulations. So that'll be a big part of it. And with each of those sort of portions of the draft regulations, there'll be opportunity for review and feedback, and then coming back with an additional draft. So it will take time, and that's sort of the bummer part of it. It's always exciting to start thinking about what the updated code would look like and how it can be improved. It does take time because we don't want it to stir up problems along the way that create sort of a big dramatic approval process. In the end, it's good to sort of hammer out some of those tough discussions and talk about what needs to happen throughout the process. And then the last phase in spring of 2026, finalizing those regulations and adoption, and providing some support to staff on how to start implementing that. For the community engagement approach, a lot of this early round of outreach is going to be that sort of two-way exchange of information that I mentioned, providing fact sheets and explainers, and helping residents understand how zoning works and probably just what zoning is. It's not everyone, like the folks in this room, are in tune with it. And so we also want to make sure we're doing stakeholder outreach. So that's communicating with people that use the code regularly, whether it's developers, designers, architects, local businesses, neighborhood organizations, and community groups that are involved with environmental issues or agriculture, that sort of thing. We want to make sure that we're casting a broad brush, collecting information from everyone, and getting as many perspectives in the process as possible. And then later on in the process, I think the focus will then sort of turn to a more community-wide focus, and allowing people the opportunity to sort of see the products and react to them. Sometimes it's hard for people to say what they want the zoning code to be like when they don't understand what the zoning code is. So that sort of is generally how we approach the community engagement process. A few photos and examples is highlighted from our colleagues at Olson Studios. I think really having lots of touch points for people to be involved, having things that are both high touch and high tech, so that people can come in person, people can participate online. There's a lot of ways that people can share their perspectives. These are some of the goals and I think concepts that have come out so far based on our conversations with staff, both the planning department and other departments. One of the things we heard a lot about is that you guys have a rural comprehensive plan that provides direction on a lot of these issues, and there's not always a clear connection between those. So making sure that this updated zoning and subdivision regulations are implementing the plan, as well as other plans and policies that you all have. Another big thing was improving user friendliness, and I'll talk through a little bit more specifically. Modernizing the zoning and subdivision regulations, really focusing on regulating the things that matter most to the community, and not necessarily creating regulations just for the purpose of it, but really focusing regulations on the things that matter and not over-regulating. We also have heard a lot about tying these regulations and growth and development to infrastructure capacity. And so it's exciting to hear you guys are going to be talking a little bit more about that in detail today in this meeting, and we're excited to listen in on that. But that's another thing to make sure that there's more clear alignment in development and infrastructure. One of the challenges in updating a zoning code is creating standards that are predictable and flexible. And those can sometimes run up against each other, but really we want people to feel like the code is creating expectations that they understand, that they have a process that they understand. And that's where you get the predictability, but also knowing that there's going to be one-offs and unique situations, and that there needs to be flexibility built into the code. So people don't have to necessarily go through a really cumbersome process to get something approved that the county would like to see happen, without having flexibility built in to allow that. And then lastly, integrating just best practices from what's going on in planning for a county perspective, but specifically tailoring it to Johnson County. There really is not a one size fits all approach. I think that's kind of what takes time through these processes, is learning about the issues that are specific to Johnson County and making sure that those are the results and the solutions are tailored to you all. And then making sure, obviously, that the regulations are legally sound, defensible, and that aren't creating a lot of lawsuits or big problems for you all. So that's it shouldn't be the last one, but that's just a baseline thing that needs to happen. So in terms of implementing the plan, you guys have this land use vision statement. You've got your planning framework, goals, policies, action steps, the land use plan map, policy area map, rural character design features. There's a lot in there already to provide direction to us. And knowing that plan came about through a community process, I think the intention is to rely heavily on that and make sure that we're really making sure the regulations are supporting what the plan is calling for. for modernizing regulations. It's creating effective standards for modern development types. Development is always changing in terms of what pencils out, what is financially feasible for people to develop. It's different in a county context, and it's different for you all knowing that a lot of the development that happens is really encouraged to be annexed and into the city. So just knowing that you guys currently have 25-ish zoning districts that are kind of not necessarily all being used, equally or well. I think there's opportunities there to start modernizing and starting to really focus on zoning districts that are focused on what the county needs. As I mentioned, regulating land use with infrastructure in coordination, filling regulatory gaps. I think we know we've heard a little bit about lighting. We've heard a little bit about I think that infrastructure land use connection, making sure that we're not creating standards for things that aren't realistic in a community where there's not central water and that sort of thing. I think that's a place to have a little bit more regulatory direction, incorporating consistency of flexibility, and I guess, again, regulating those things that matter most to the community, but not going overboard or providing you regulations that you don't need. In terms of user friendliness, a few sort of examples from other communities we've worked with. A lot of that is really focused on providing graphics and tables and charts and information that's a little bit more approachable for the average user. If we're designing, the documents and the information for your everyday person that doesn't use the code regularly, not only does it make it more approachable to them and create an easier process for staff, it's also creating a lot of benefits for people that use the code very regularly. So that sort of is the intention of how to design the document and present information. Some of the things we've heard a little bit already is that you guys have already been engaged in looking at ADUs as sort of a tool to provide a little bit more flexibility in your code. And that there's also, I think, a recognition that you do have some very unique communities. I'm thinking of the Stillwell, Blue Valley area, and knowing that one size doesn't fit all in the community, knowing that there's some unique contexts. And so that's one of the other things we've heard a lot. And then also we know that we're expecting community members that are passionate about the community and want to have a say in the process. And so we think that's a strength. It's better to have people involved than to not hear from anyone until the very end. Some of the challenges, we know that there's sometimes a lack of alignment between the zoning code and the plan. There's going to be limited affordable housing options. Affordable housing is the buzzword everywhere. We know it's a problem here, but also knowing that it's a county context and it's not necessarily going to be the county's role to provide, higher density housing opportunities. So we recognize that as sort of a challenge that we'll need to be talking about with the community. And then also, I think just making sure that the procedures are comprehensive and easy to understand. And I think that's something as we've been diving in, we recognize will need to be honed and clarified through the process. So some of the next steps. Tomorrow, we're going to be meeting with an advisory committee that's been assembled to sort of provide advice. They're not going to be voting on anything or determining necessarily exactly, what ends up in the code or doesn't. It's a group that's been assembled by staff to sort of provide that first basis test to provide a reality check and review documents and deliverables and make sure that things are headed in the right direction. In addition, we'll be providing regular updates to you all and the county commissioners, making sure that you're apprised of what's happening in this process. We know it's really important to the community and important to a lot of you. And so we don't want anyone to get blindsided along the way and find out something's changing that they hadn't heard about. So providing you guys with opportunities to weigh in. A project website. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on the screen before this one, I noticed something there. It says limited affordable housing options. Would you expound on that, please?
Yeah, I think just knowing that that affordable housing is a buzzword in the planning world right now, that there's an interest sort of nationwide in creating housing options that are more affordable. I think a challenge that we're recognizing is that because you all are unincorporated, limited infrastructure, that is a challenge that I think we need to help communicate to the community, that the solutions and the possible options on the table are pretty limited, and that in the county context, people shouldn't necessarily expect, what we might expect in a more urban area or a suburban area to be affordable housing. I think that was just sort of to highlight that maybe infrastructure challenge, and to clarify that to community members.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Yeah. So the project website will be on the county's webpage soon. That content is being finalized. And then looking into next month, we'll be providing a similar project overview to the zoning boards. We'll be coming out with this code audit and annotated outline that will provide sort of based on the feedback we've already received from the community and things we've heard, a sort of an assessment of what the code has working for it, not changing things that are working well, and what things need to be readdressed, and how, and I guess different options or solutions that we would recommend to make those changes, and an annotated outline that'll provide an update of sort of like what's the structure of this new code. I think the intention would be that it's not how it currently is, which is a series of separate PDFs on the website, but something a little bit easier to navigate and more approachable for folks to dive into. And then also in November, starting in on updating the zoning districts and uses, which will be the sort of first chunk of the code that we'll start in on making actual changes to. So that starts off pretty quick, and it's amazing that it takes a long time to get through it. But that sort of, I think, highlights just the necessary public process that's required to do this sort of thing right. With that, I'll leave time for questions or comments that you guys have.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Grisey. Just maybe a question. So I've been a part of several different redrafting efforts, and one thing that has, is kind of an interesting process to me, because it seems like there's a lot of drafting done before policy direction is given and voted on by this board. And then it seems like we're kind of having to undo. We get a set of draft regulations that have policy decisions kind of printed in them, and then we're voting on them. I guess I was curious, is there a reason why we couldn't get those options ahead of time and vote, so that when that immense drafting effort is done, maybe it kind of streamlines that process?
Yeah, I think I would say that it is a very iterative process. And so I think in our experience, sometimes it's helpful to like have something to react to. And so I think just because something is drafted, I don't want to give you the impression that like a decision has been made. I think we try to draw from what we've heard from the community and the stakeholders and feedback from you all, as providing a little bit of that policy direction. And I think leaning heavily on the rural comprehensive plan to provide that policy direction. So I think we want to ground it in some of the policy guidance that you have already established. But definitely, I think when we're providing some sort of like draft content, it's it's far from final, I think, is the expectation up until later in the process. But maybe Sean.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Sean Penley, planning staff. Madam Chair, that's a good question. We certainly are not want to get too far out ahead of ourselves on this for any draft updates. We're definitely, the basis of all of this will be following policies that have already been adopted through the comprehensive plan. We're not going to present anything or propose anything that's going to deviate from that. There are some detailed regulations and maybe some development standards that haven't been reviewed yet. That's something that we certainly know we will need that additional direction. We'll get some of that through the advisory committee, some of that through the planning commission, and then you just get input from the public. But certainly we will not be presenting or drafting anything before we get some of that direction. I think there's still going to be opportunities for us to bring this forward before we get too deep into the drafting of the regulations. But certainly we'll look for that input throughout the process.
Yeah, I think when I looked at the map of different locations that you had done draft regulations, I'm sure there's probably some common themes that you've seen from communities in the past. And I mean, I think seeing some of those that maybe we can start thinking about ahead of time. So for example, if energy efficiency is something we want, but I think that people on this board should vote on those type of policy decisions. And I think that getting any sort of advanced notice, at least I know like with the solar regulations and it wasn't as much with the airport regulations that we kind of did. It seemed like there was a lot of drafting that happened. And then, once we finally saw them in black and white, then we started voting and making decisions on different aspects of that plan. And it seemed like it was a little bit backwards to me. I didn't know if there was a way to at least get some early direction on some of those things so that when we saw the draft plans, they were closer to what this board would agree on. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there since it's early in the process to consider bringing us in at some earlier stages, just to get some general policy, obviously subject to a vote with my fellow commissioners. Sure, go ahead.
Sean Penley, I'll start with my thoughts and then see if maybe Paul can add some examples from other communities. So for our rural comprehensive plan, there's ongoing updates every year. We review that annually for any updates. And, we've had some of the recent updates with the Sunflower area, the northwest part of the county. There's land use updates there. We had our compatibility plans for the airport. Other updates as needed. We're always looking at that. The land use policies that are a part of our rural comprehensive plan are still valid, still in effect. And we usually every year when we bring that update to the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, we say that the policies that are set forth in the comprehensive plan are still valid and that are still in effect. There are always going to be details though with the zoning regulations, which need to refer back to our comprehensive plan, but there's going to be some details that we get into that maybe were not contemplated with the rural comprehensive plan. And we need to be looking at modernizing some of the zoning districts just because of change over time. And although the comprehensive plan is looked at annually, it was first adopted, I believe, in 1994. Is that right, Karen? The current version of the comprehensive plan, 1994. So obviously a lot's changed and a lot of things have been updated. Different chapters have been updated throughout the years.
So that's an evolving document.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. We'll bring forward any significant updates to that rural comprehensive plan every year. If there's any update we need, whether it's a certain, one particular chapter or an appendix, like we did the airport plans, we'll do that. Yeah. And we made an update with for example, the utility scale solar regulations. That was a major update to our zoning regulations. We also had complementary updates in the rural comprehensive plan. We had to discuss that because it was a big issue. So yeah, they go hand in hand. But of course, the zoning regulations will implement those basic policies of the comprehensive plan.
I see Commissioner Connell raised his hand. Do you have a question?
I do. First of all, we could not hear the comments made by the gentleman on the board. I don't know if his mic was not turned on or not, but my question is, it's really a follow-up to Lindsay's question about the board voting on things. What is the responsibility of the Planning Commission versus the zoning boards in this process? In about approving things or commenting on things?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Sean Pendley, planning staff. The role of the Planning Commission is really to set forth that policy and direction for updates to the zoning regulations. The zoning boards we're going to provide an update to the zoning boards, and they certainly will see the effects of any updates to the regulations once they've been adopted. But the zoning boards won't directly be involved with making recommendations for the regulations. They will have an opportunity, of course, to input with public comment portion of this update. But the planning commission's role is to really serve as that advisory committee in a sense. It is the planning commission's role to provide the ultimate recommendations for these changes to our regulations. The zoning boards will effectively see the impacts of an adopted regulations. Hope that answers the question for the comparison between planning commission and zoning board.
Yes, thank you.
Was there any other comments or questions? Thank you, Paul. It was a great presentation. We look forward to getting more information from your group. I appreciate it. I think we'll move on to the Planning Commission training, the city and county collaboration.
Good evening, Zoe Brown, Planning Department. So today we'll be covering 2 training topics. The first is city and county collaboration, and the second will be infrastructure. And I'm really excited to finally get into these training topics tonight. We'll be keeping it pretty high level, but we do have more topics to follow, so we can get into more specifics if you guys feel that that's necessary at a later time. So my portion of the training is essentially going to be a little bit of a political science and a little bit of planning kind of crash course, and then Scott will get into infrastructure. So I will be talking about how cities and counties get authority, explaining the process and different types of annexation, and discussing appropriate planning principles for urban fringe areas. So cities versus counties, how do they get their authority? Counties are created by the state government and operate under provisions set out in the state constitution. Counties perform state functions at a local level. However, they also provide municipal services to unincorporated areas, such as planning and zoning like we do here. The funding for counties come from property tax revenue, sales tax, and funds from other government agencies at the federal and state level. Cities, on the other hand, are self-governed. They're formed after residents petition for incorporation. There's usually a public hearing, a decision by the Board of County Commissioners, and then a vote by the residents who are in that area to be incorporated, and then a city charter is adopted. Cities are creatures of the state and derive powers from the state, and these powers are expressly granted by the state to the municipality. Cities tend to have more diverse revenue streams than counties from different fees related to services and utilities. They also have property tax and sales tax like counties, and those are a significant part of the budget for both. Moving into annexation, this is the primary way that cities expand their boundaries. It can serve many purposes. Some of the purposes are to provide efficient services, increase the population and therefore the tax base, provide areas for future growth, and expand planning and zoning authority. This process can be contentious, as you guys all probably know. Most states require the majority of landowners or residents to consent to annexation. The most common exception is when the area is surrounded by a city. Most states require annexation areas to be contiguous, and typically if city sewer and water aren't available, the developer is the one who needs to pay for the expansion of services. And that includes to any properties in between the parcel being annexed and the existing city boundary. In Kansas, unilateral annexation, meaning that the city does not need county approval, can occur when specific criteria are met. So the land has to be platted and some part of the land adjoins the city boundary. The land adjoins the city and is owned by or held in trust by the city or a city agency. And the land adjoins the city, and a written petition for consent to annex is filed with the city by the owner. Annexation of land not adjoining a city requires county approval. So the governing body of any city may annex land not adjoining the city if the land is located within the same county as the city. The owner or owners of the land petition for or consent in writing to the annexation of the land, and the Board of County Commissioners, by a vote of 2/3, determine that the annexation of the land will not prevent the proper growth and development of that area or another city located within the county. So city urban growth areas are a consideration in how we plan for these urban fringe areas. An urban fringe is an area where urban and rural environments meet, creating a transitional zone with a mix of urban and natural landscapes. So these areas are important as they serve as a buffer between the city and the country. It provides opportunities for recreation, agricultural, and also preserving biodiversity. In Johnson County, the fringe areas still offer convenient access to jobs, but with a less urban environment. The fringe allows for the production of food and other essential resources, contributing to local and regional economies. And lastly, it offers a connection between rural and urban communities, facilitating cultural exchange, trade, and cooperation in general. In Johnson County, the urban fringe areas are located in the future growth areas of Olathe, DeSoto, Edgerton, Gardner, Spring Hill, and Overland Park. And in our comprehensive plan, the intended uses are agricultural, low-density residential, and limited non-residential development where there's adequate infrastructure. So it's areas like the New Century Air Center. So some of the actions the county may take related to development within the urban fringe policy areas include allowing clustered and conservation subdivisions, creating criteria for density bonuses for the preservation of open space, preparing design guidelines for commercial areas, encouraging shadow platting, and updating minimum infrastructure to be compatible with those adjacent cities. So some of that will also be touched on as a part of the zoning and subdivision regulations update. That is my overview. So we can open it up for discussion or questions, and then we'll head into Scott's. Yes.
Commissioner McGank, I'd like to know, what do you mean when you say shadow platting?
Yes, so shadow platting, it's not, we don't typically do it in the county. It is something we talk about in the comprehensive plan, but it's a technique where essentially as a part of the planning process, a developer outlines where platting could occur, development could occur. It's not legally binding, but it's basically just a visual to anticipate future growth.
Thank you.
And Sean, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Sean Penley. That's shadow planning is, as Zoe mentioned, something that's not typically done with our plats, but it's an opportunity for, let's say, if in an RUR zoning or a subdivision, there may be 10-acre lots, but the owner may want in the future to rezone or even show a larger tract, a 20-acre tract, but maybe has a plan to further subdivide it. They could essentially provide a shadow plat as to a future conceptual plat. It's not, can't really be approved as for actual development, but often it helps in guiding things like if there's a question of whether or not there'll be future street connections or there are other things that might be needed that we know in the future, how some owners do have a plan for further subdivision. It's a way of showing that. And it's something that's encouraged more often in some plats than others where it maybe makes more sense, but that's something that we do. It's possible it can be provided through a plat process, but it's not required. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. I think now we'll do, or what is the next part, the infrastructure training? Okay.
I'll just mention too, at the end of the Public Works presentation, we can also answer questions again for any of these planning topics we're presenting tonight.
I'm Scott Karyorgis, project engineer with Public Works Department, and tonight I'll be talking to you about infrastructure and how it relates to some of our planning processes and give you a good overview of some of our programs. So tonight, we touched on some of the planning items and city-county collaboration. And just building on that, I want to hit on CARNUP and the Johnson County Transportation Connection plan in the Southwest metropolitan area, roadway maintenance and safety improvements, and current and future roadway projects, and then again, possibly some examples on city-county collaboration. So to give some background on CARNUP, as others have mentioned, it's a key component to the Rural Comprehensive Plan. It's currently Chapter 4 of the Comprehensive Plan. And the mission of CARNUP, the planning process, is to achieve a community consensus for maximizing the utility of the county's existing arterial road network to meet anticipated needs. I also wanted to note that the comprehensive plan is reviewed on an annual basis, and CARNUP is updated as necessary. It's gone through several major updates. I tried to hit on some of the key ones here. Don't have time tonight to explain all of them, but a lot of these came with recommendations and then redesignations or reclassifications of key arterial routes. At the bottom, you'll notice I've mentioned that we anticipate CARNUP recommendations with that transportation connection plan and possibly some updates in 2025 or 2026. Jumping into some roadway classifications. Here I've got a good visual on the right and trying to note our classifications per CARNUP. We've got type 1, which is our minor arterial routes. Type 2, the second one down there, is our major arterial routes. Type 3, parkways, and type 4, or major or highways. And just to give a heads up, that we really don't have any of these type 4s, even though they're covered in our comprehensive plan and in CARNUP. We really focus on the type 1 through 3. So that's what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis when we review any type of projects here. And access management, just taking the opportunity here to emphasize the importance of having proper spacing and just focusing, depending on the route, limiting entrances on some of those higher traffic, higher volume areas. It could lead to safety issues, could get frustrated residents, higher crash rates, et cetera. One example locally here is near I-35 along Santa Fe Road. You can kind of tell pretty big difference as you're driving through Olathe. You'll get some congestion. There's not quite the good balance between traffic flow and direct connections to properties and parcels throughout that area. As you go east, you can see there's quite a difference there as you get into OP. So that was a good example. Next item here, changing gears, is the Johnson County Transportation Connection Plan, or the Southwest Metro area. I've got a map here on the right side that contains the study area. And a lot of this came about as the area in city of DeSoto, where the Panasonic site and other commercial industrial developments are located, has really grown, and we're expecting rapid growth. So the purpose of the study, one of the main focuses is to look at the transportation network and see what's going to be needed, both short and long term. So the core team members included in this effort include City of DeSoto, Johnson County, and KDOT, and the technical committee involved with this also includes several nearby municipalities and local agencies. We do expect draft recommendations by the winter of 2025, and then final recommendations in spring 2025. And I've provided a link to the website. It does have a little bit more information and background if you're looking to learn a little bit more about that. Kind of changing gears, I did want to hit on, I wasn't sure of this group's awareness of some of the items related to our transportation network and infrastructure that Public Works does. So I thought the maintenance, one of the ones that is at the forefront. So I want to hit on it here, capture some of our key programs. So we do have an overlay program, a chip seal program, dust control program. We do snow removal, roadside ditch maintenance, and weed control, culvert maintenance. And then we do sign replacement and pavement markings as well. And these are all of these items are funded through our Public Works maintenance budget. Changing gears, we also do have some capital improvements and safety improvement projects. So typical roadway safety improvement projects for unincorporated JOCO include shoulder widening, roadside safety improvements, preservation projects for culvert and bridge replacements, and then intersection improvements. If there's a way to make that intersection safer by providing proper signage or changing pavement markings. That's something we look at too. Some of those factors for the safety project prioritization include looking at pavement condition, traffic volumes, current and future or projected development projects, and then crash history. So there's quite a bit that goes into it. All these projects are funded through the Road, Bridge, and Culvert CIP. And then adding on, there's a good graphic here, a map of the current 5-year CIP projects, which are in that first grouping, and then some future or potential projects as we project out over the next several years. So just gives a good graphic of working on those projects, and we're trying to plan and accommodate those with our current budget. And the last item I wanted to hit on today was the city-county collaboration. So the main items we consider there for city-county projects are jurisdictional frontage and right-of-way, potential annexation, and county roadway improvements if they've been completed recently, or if whether that infrastructure roadway is meeting county standards, planned or future developments that you might have in unincorporated county. And then we'll look at traffic impacts. And a lot of these items can vary from project to project. So we take more of a case-by-case kind of approach and just evaluate it as these projects come in. And on the bottom here, and then the map, this is basically, it's an example that we've recently, that we're working on right now, actually. It's Black Bob Road. And just along the west side of Heritage Park, we got a section there between 159th Street and 167th Street. And this is a roadway expansion project, safety project. So it's going from a 2-lane roadway to a 4-lane roadway. And part of the scope of that is it's including some additional driving lanes, some turn lanes, street lighting, sidewalks, trails, crosswalks, and then improving the access to Heritage Park along that west side. Do anticipate construction to start in early to mid 2025. And that's all I've got to share today. So if you had any questions.
I had a quick question. This is Commissioner Grisey. How do you guys coordinate with the cities? So for example, if there's one of those fringe areas, maybe just on the city project that may have a traffic impact on the traffic in a neighboring or close to it unincorporated road, do you guys go and speak at the city meetings, or how does that coordination happen so that there's not unintentional impacts of a city project or an unincorporated project on the neighboring roads for the other division, I guess?
Sure. I'll take a stab and then I'll let Sean and Brian jump in if they have anything to add. But
Sure.
Typically, if there's county right-of-way directly impacted by the project, they do have to coordinate with us. And honestly, it's like I said, a case by case. So there might be like a traffic impact study that's been done if it's a new development, maybe. But if it's a public project, there's usually a relationship that we've built over the years working on previous projects. So we'll just work with their engineering staff. And if there's public meetings, I haven't personally attended those, so I'll let senior staff speak to that. But I think if it's a joint project, there's the possibility that we would attend those meetings as well.
Yeah, I think Scott covered it pretty well. We do try to coordinate with cities on different projects development projects that might impact the county. Really, it's more about when it's actual, I think, a public improvement, when there's a interlocal agreement for a public improvement, like the example that Scott explained for Black Bob Road. But for a development project that might potentially, a city development project that might impact an unincorporated area, the cities don't always extend the same courtesy in terms of a notice to the county, except for and if the county owns a property or has ownership of right of way. If we're within a notice area, staff in the county is included on that notice. We, as you may know, if any of the zoning boards would know, we send out a zoning notice to the cities on all of our applications that affect a certain city, let's say. The city always has an opportunity to comment on that application. Cities don't do that because they to be honest, they get so many more. I could tell you from past experience as a former city planner, it would be the counties would be inundated if the city sent every single zoning notice for every single case to the county. So they try to notice the county when it would affect the development. There have been some examples where a development might impact a county road or a surrounding area. As Scott mentioned, this county can always provide comments on that. The city can ultimately do what they want with it in their jurisdiction for their frontage of their road. But certainly we do work with cities when necessary, when there's a development that might impact the county. We certainly do provide them comments, as the cities do to us as well. You may have seen or have heard in some projects where cities will provide us with comments. But at the end of the day, the different jurisdictions have their decisions to make with their projects. But it's a balancing act. It just depends. It's a case by case situation, as Scott mentioned.
Commissioner McGank, I have a question about this. It's kind of interesting. This is on here because I'm actually involved in this. Black Bob, I live on that road, and I got a question that seems the city looks like they are dictating what's happening. I live in the county on the east side of the road, and on the west side is the city. And so the county has come to me and said, here's what the city has proposed to do. And I've pushed back on some things like a sidewalk. I don't want a sidewalk in my yard. And everybody on the street that when we all live in the county, and they said, well, that's the city wants to do that. We really don't have a choice. You're getting a sidewalk. So it seems to me like the city dictates to the county what they are going to do. And that seems backwards to me. We didn't have any say so whatsoever. They came to us and said, done deal. You're getting a sidewalk. How does that work? I mean, how is that supposed to work?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Brian Peting. I'm the county engineer for Public Works. So yeah, when an area urbanizes, the city will come in with their standard. And that typically is a sidewalk. And that is the pain of a developing county like Johnson County. And we need to think about those types of urbanization infrastructure that's needed, and the sidewalk makes sense. And I know it's difficult for someone that has lived in the unincorporated area and you have a rural road, and I think of all the folks in the Southwest area that were impacted by Burlington Northern. They had a little gravel road, and then they woke up the next morning, it was 4 lanes urban with a warehouse across the street. And putting in those urban types of improvements are kind of the cost we need to pay for having a great county like Johnson County that urbanizes. So that standard with the sidewalk makes sense. And while, yeah, the city is saying that's what they want, we support that.
Commissioner Grisey, maybe keying off that question. I guess I'm just kind of curious about, again, this relationship between the city and county. I understand that if the city annexed property, that certainly their codes and standards, if they want their city to have sidewalks or things like that, that would apply. But if there hasn't been a formal annexation process, does the county, then would the city control that, or would that be a county decision on whether, for example, to have sidewalks on a certain road?
If it's in the city decides.
Right, but if it's unincorporated, if it's,
and that's what I'm saying. While we're saying yes, the city, they may have been a little strong in saying the city requires it, our hands are tied. No, but is a sidewalk a good infrastructure improvement there? Yes, and we support that.
Commissioner Orick, and when you say we, you're talking about at a staff level.
Correct. And then we take these agreements to our Board of County Commissioner and we tell them what we're doing, and they agree to an interlocal agreement.
That was going to be my question. It's ultimately the interlocal agreement that dictates these things.
Correct.
And those have to be approved by the Board of Commissioners, but not the Planning Commission.
Yes.
Is that right?
And you're right. When we say we and staff, we're making recommendations to the decision body, and that's 100% the board. And we will outline that in an interlocal agreement, what the costs are, who's paying for what percentage, what type of infrastructure is going in there. So they're fully aware, and they're the ones giving the thumbs up or down on these types of things.
And as those proposed agreements are put together, staff's your staff and their staffs are working together toward an interlocal agreement,
Yes,
knowing that you both have to go get governing body approval ultimately.
correct.
Are the landowners that are impacted by that interlocal agreement notified of the impact to their potential property prior to the agreement being voted on? So for example, if let's say that interlocal agreement said, we're going to put sidewalks down both lanes, would the landowners that are impacted by that be provided notice prior to that decision being made so they could come and, maybe do public comment and express either preference for or against that?
I'll need to check on the timing of those.
Okay.
In our situation, it wasn't.
But to a large extent, and I understand the impacts, but we'll have issues where we're doing a safety project and people don't want it. And that's not really the issue. The issue is we need to do a safety project and putting sidewalks in next to a park. I understand folks want to maintain the rural character and not want it. Some of these things aren't up for debate, such as where we put stop signs or how we're going to stripe it. And there's safety issues. And I don't want, sometimes you can be disingenuous by saying, well, what are your thoughts on that? And that really isn't something that we, if we're going to put 4 lanes in because that's what the projected capacity is for that road and that's what the traffic's going to be, that's a somewhat of an engineering decision.
Yeah, so I'm the Commissioner Gersay, I'm also an engineer, so I'm aware that engineers have certain guidelines and standards that they have to follow. I think maybe what the planning commissioners are asking is that there may be public comment that could help influence. So for example, maybe a 4-lane road is, suggested through an engineer's, training and experience, but maybe there's some sort of berm that would be put in place or other requests of the local public that, who are impacted by the potential engineer's recommendations for safety. So I was just trying to understand what the timing of that was I think for me personally, I think it's very important for the community to have, I have so enjoyed my access to this board and being able to learn more. And I think improving community involvement and awareness and hearing, hey, this is a safety issue, that may help just improve the communication between landowners and the staff that are helping to improve our community.
Yeah, good point.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Commissioner Praderis, I can testify from personal experience. I live approximately half mile south of Commissioner McGank. And the first notice I had of anything occurring with the Black Bob Road, Lackman, actually, expansion, the housing development being put in or anything of that nature were stakes showing up in my yard. So there was zero communication. There was no opportunity to show up in forum such as this and give any kind of feedback whatsoever. So that being said, I would say that the level of communication is non-existent. And it probably needs to be improved because it does directly impact landowners and residents, who are used to living, in a rural setting, for instance, as this is, because I was unincorporated county there. So now I'm being surrounded by city. And like I say, the first notice I had of it was stakes showing up in my yard. There was no letters, no anything, no opportunity to show up at a public hearing at all. So I would urge that perhaps in the future, to help other landowners avoid such pain, that we can potentially work to improve this communication.
Good thought.
Commissioner Connolly, did I see your hand up earlier? Did you have a question?
I do. So in the particular example that's on the screen here, this Black Bob Blackman Road expansion. So I assume there's a cost sharing thing with the cities on these kind of projects. And is there a formula for that, or is it just negotiated every time? And does the county, are they fair deals for the county?
So it's on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on what has occurred in that area, what type of development. In the case of Heritage Park, the county developed Heritage Park. The city is not going to annex and develop that and collect excise tax. So the county has a little bigger responsibility to help with the improvements there. They're going to be contributing a lot of traffic. An example, just a quarter mile to the north there, where, and I'll put my cursor over it. This section, just north of 159th Street, the county had done an improvement 15 years or so ago. And the city recognized, hey, that needs to be 4 lanes. It needs to meet 4 lanes to go to 4 lanes. And they asked us if we'd participated. And we said, well, we've done our improvement there. And that traffic that's requiring that 4 lanes is really by the city. So in that one, we said, we will help and we'll purchase the right of way on the county side, but you're responsible for everything else. So it really is a case by case basis. We look at what's developed. Is the city going to annex it someday and collect excise tax? All those factor into it. So there is not a set policy, but kind of guidelines that we go through. And again, like we were talking earlier, all these are agreements that we discuss with our board and gets approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Staff prepares it. We give a recommendation. We discuss it with the board and they give a thumbs up or down on it.
A quick question on that. Is it go to the zoning board first and then the Board of County Commissioners? Or is it directly from staff to Board of County Commissioners?
Yeah, the zoning boards aren't involved with CIP projects.
And so I was just curious, sorry, this is Commissioner Grisey. So if there was public comment, let's say there was members of the public who wanted to voice support or maybe suggestions, would the first time that they would have awareness of one of those agreements is when a finalized agreement is being presented to the board for either a thumbs up, thumbs down vote?
You would have to be paying attention to the agenda of the board. So it'd be pretty hard to know. And again, that's one of those where when we decide and the board agrees that we need to do a project, that's for everybody in the county, not just the people that live next to the road. The people that drive it want those safety improvements and capacity improvements. So no, there isn't necessarily a specific notice to those folks living adjacent to it.
Okay.
This is Sean Penley, planning staff. I will add one more thing about that that's sort of related to that. There isn't a public notice process as far as these public improvements for streets. However, even before that, oftentimes what will happen is when the cities are receiving an application for a zoning or a plat, and I think there is in this case an example on the west side immediately across from the entrance on Heritage Park on Black Bob, there is a city development that was recently rezoned and platted. There is notice on that. Now it's only notice that's sent out within 200 feet of the subject property, but that's really the only notice to surrounding properties. The cities have their, and I think it goes out to 1,000 feet in the county. They follow the county's notice standards. So they do send a notice in that respect so that the surrounding properties get a notice when there's an actual development plan on a private property. But for public improvements on public right of way, I don't think it follows that same notice requirement.
Well, my fellow commissioners, I was just going to say maybe that would be something that we may consider voting on as a policy preference that maybe we may want to spend some time on to see if there's additional regulations that maybe we could propose to improve communication to the public. Again, not to substitute the public's judgment for that of the county engineers of safety, because obviously there are safety concerns and some people are impacted more than others, but just to give people awareness and an opportunity to voice a concern or a preference that can be taken into account by the Board of County Commissioners. It may be a useful place for us to spend our time.
Commissioner Orrick again, a couple things. Yeah, it sounds like kind of the gap is there is no statutory requirement to notify abutting property owners that your street's gonna be improved. And whether that should be required or not, it's currently not. And then secondly, and I don't know whether it occurred on this project or not, but oftentimes on major improvement projects, sounds like this, there are public meetings that the engineering firms organize and with city staff in advance to try to get the word out that, hey, there's a big project coming, come to this open house.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, I think, it's progress, not perfection, but I think if there's a way that we can help improve and, connect the the hardworking staff members who are doing, obviously have the public's interest at heart in communicating their desires and maybe some of the concerns of landowners. Seems like that's always a place of improvement. Any other questions? Sorry.
Commissioner McGank, I just want to comment off what he said. They did do that way after they had already done all the drawings, all decisions had been made. They brought us in and it was really, it was upsetting because it seemed like we were just getting it shoved down our throat. Here's what we're doing. You're going to take it. You're not going to like it. We know you're not going to like it, but this is what's happening. And it might have happened anyway, but at least make us feel good about it at some point. I mean, it was really, it was all a surprise. And then any of the suggestions we had were shot down 1, 2, 3, and they were mostly reasonable suggestions. I mean, I realized it was going to go to 4-lane. I don't like it, but I knew that was going to happen. But hey, how about we do a berm here? Or how about we do this? Or if you're going to do we got a huge sidewalk across the way. Let's make ours more narrow. But no, we're not doing any of that. There was just no negotiation, this is our way or the highway, and we're going to take your land, and here's what we're going to give you for it. And you really have very little say-so in it. That's the way I felt.
Right.
I think that's the way he's on the street, you're on the street. We all felt that way.
We're on the planning commission.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Was there any other questions? And, again, I think that one of the things that I learned, and I'm just kind of being honest with my fellow commissioners, when I first came onto this board, I think I kind of sat back and was a lot of the agendas and everything I thought were, I had to follow what's on there. Just know that if we want to take action and we want to maybe have an interest in a particular regulation or explore potential new things, we can vote on that and we can direct the the planners to focus on that. And so that's something that we can do as a group, and I'm happy to discuss it with you guys further. Thank you so much. Sorry for that little extended, but I thought it was really helpful to me, and I think most of the commissioners agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're at the director's report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Sean Penley, planning staff. I just have a couple of quick announcements. Board of County Commissioners, there are no actions that relate to the Planning Commission. Just to say that we will also be providing the Board of County Commissioners updates on the future zoning and subdivision regulations update. That'll be something that will appear on the manager's memo. But really, the Planning Commission and our zoning boards will probably hear about it first. For Board of Zoning Appeals reorganization, there was recently new bylaws that were drafted and approved by the Board of County Commissioners for reorganization. Really, it didn't change much for our BZA. There's still 7 members. They're still unincorporated area residents, but the appointments changed a little bit in terms of how the board appoints members, and they're appointed by the 3rd District Commissioner and the 6th District Commissioner, are unincorporated commissioners, and the chairman. So they each have an appointment or a nomination on that. So that was recently approved by the Board of County Commissioners. And then, just as we mentioned, future agenda items, we will be bringing forward more updates on our draft zoning and subdivision regulations updates as soon as we have some deliverables from Clarion. And we'll have additional training sessions as well. So look forward to any additional input and questions on that. But that concludes the director's report.
Wonderful. So for my fellow commissioners, is there any old business or new business that anyone would like to bring to the board? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Steve McGank, a motion to adjourn.
And a second? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you again. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Brought up some good points, Steve. Good job.
This meeting we've had so far.